Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. So, one of the most interesting storylines to have picked up within comic books over the course of this last year has been the rise and explosion of the Fame variant comic book. Of course, if you guys know what I'm talking about, these are the comic books often sold at comic book cons that feature celebrities on them drawn in comic book form. These things have absolutely been dominating the comic book con aftermarket. And I think it's really interesting because this story keeps getting crazier and crazier, and there's more and more conversation around it to the point where now we have artists coming out and saying that they will not do these covers, nor will they work with the company or the retailers that produce them. So in this video, I wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive on this Fame variant cover fad and kind of explain why artists are rebelling against them, retailers keep doing them, and how they're skirting the line of legality. But of course, before I get to it, if you guys could like, comment, subscribe, I appreciate it. Helps for the channel doing those things. But man, oh man, let us get into it. Now, I already have this post in front of you guys here. This one is done by Nathan Szerdy. He is a prolific comic book artist, often, creating very, very sexy, beautiful images with women on the cover. He's done a lot of work for all of the various companies, DC, Dynamite, Marvel. He is certainly an artist that will be in high demand, especially within a certain subset of the modern retail market. Now, he recently made this post that went on his Facebook and actually went pretty viral, considering that it got 103 comments. But he had this to say: those Fame books, not touching those in a million years, nor get near them. If I find you are a retailer that carries them, I'm out. Big words from a pretty, popular, in-demand current comic book artist. Now, let me pause it right here and kind of show you guys, what Tidalwave is and what these Fame books actually are, so you can get a more clear understanding before we really dive deep into the comment section and see what people are talking about. But this is Tidalwave Productions. They are the comic book publisher that often creates a lot of these types of books that are, known as the Fame comic book line. And as you guys can see, they're often, comic books that depict certain celebrities on them. So here they have a Otani sort of comic book right here. They have a Joan Rivers one. They have an Angel Reese one right here. And all the various sort of celebrities that you would imagine, might have some impact within pop culture: John Cena, Charlie Cox, etc. And for the most part, this is one of those things that kind of rides the line of being able to kind of depict a certain celebrity's likeness. Do they have to actually get Charlie Cox's permission to put him on a cover? Well, yes and no, but for the most part, they can get away with it because these things have been described as biographies. As you guys know, you are totally entitled to write a biography of anybody you want, as long as it's not slander. So now within the comic book space, they're making comic book biographies where they will take a certain celebrity, they will do an impression of them or draw them up in comic book form, put it on a cover inside the book. I don't know, nobody actually knows what's inside the book because nobody actually reads comic books anymore, but it might be something like the artist's work, or it might be, a story that they put in there, or, maybe it's going to be the Wikipedia article of Charlie Cox. I don't really know. Doesn't really matter. People buy it for the cover regardless. But one of the interesting things with this is that as these books have become more and more popular, Tidalwave has been pushing it further and further and further to the edge of what blurs the line between, copyright infringement and essentially being a knockoff version of a Marvel or DC comic book. Now, here I am on Key Collector. This has all the Fame books pulled up right here. But I want to show you guys some of the things that I find very strange, how they're able to ride that line. Like going back to this Charlie Cox thing, okay, I sort of get it. He's just in sort of a suit right there. You put Charlie Cox on a comic book cover, and maybe somebody wants to buy it because they're a Charlie Cox fan. But then you get to something like this, Fame Beetlejuice. And when you pull this up, well, what do you see on the cover right here? You see Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice. Now, they call it Beetlejuice. They don't actually put it in the name, but that's what this book is described as. And they're kind of writing this off as being a biography of Michael Keaton. But for the most part, I mean, we know what this is. We are actually seeing Beetlejuice on the cover. And I think it's fair to say that Tidalwave Productions is not going to have the license to produce the Beetlejuice character. So this is a 2024 New York Comic Con exclusive that they put out. That's just one example of this. Let me go to some other ones here. They have a Fame book of Satoshi Tajiri, the guy who invented Pokemon. And then what do we see? The Amazing Pocket Monsters and a picture of what is essentially Mewtwo on the cover right there. So we're kind of in this place where this is a biography of the person who created Pokemon, but on the cover is basically just that of Pokemon. I mean, you would never be able to sort of tell that that wasn't an officially created Pokemon comic book. And then they continue to push it where they're making Fame Charlie Cox and they're putting him in the Daredevil costume and also putting him with Spider-Man, and they're calling this street level heroes. And to me, this is a very, very clear ripoff of Spider-Man and Daredevil in a team up comic book, but they're calling it a Charlie Cox biography. And maybe they can sort of, verbal judo this thing and sort of say that, well, Charlie Cox, he does play Daredevil in the show, and that's a part of his story. And therefore, that's a part of his biography. And therefore, we're allowed to kind of create a depiction of him playing this character on this cover. But we all know what this is. This is them kind of, making a comic book that essentially looks like a Marvel comic book, especially if you look at it in a Virgin, variant. I mean, if you saw this in a booth at a comic book retailer, why would you not assume that this is an official Marvel comic book? I think it's fair to say that you would assume that. And that's probably one of the reasons why these comic books have done so well. If you're somebody who's just kind of a tourist, a casual comic book person at a comic book con, you're walking around, you got $20 to spend, you look on the wall and you see, oh, hey, Spider-Man, Daredevil, I like that. Let me pick up that comic book. And you don't know that it's not an official Marvel product. And then they have ones like this, which again, kind of like the Beetlejuice one, I'm just confused how they're able to do this. This is a Hayden Christensen biography, but they're calling this Fame Darth Vader. And yes, they're showing Hayden Christensen here with his, cracked helmet. But for the most part, I mean, we know that that is the image that we saw in the Disney TV series. And then similarly here, they have this kind of variant cover, which has him doing an homage to Batman 423. So I don't know how they're exactly able to play it off that this is not a Darth Vader ripoff and this is like somehow a Hayden Christensen biography, but they're able to do it. They continue to do it, and they continue to be very, very popular and sell at comic book cons and also on the secondary market. And that's also one of the reasons why people probably like it, because they're able to flip these books and make money on them. And if you're making money on stuff, well, what the hell do you care? And this is kind of the vicious cycle that repeats. And now that brings us back to this post right here, again by Nathan Szerdy, that we kicked off this video with, where he said, those Fame books, I'm not touching those in a million years. I don't want to get near them. And if I find you are a retailer that carries them, I'm out. And that's kind of a really interesting stance that he is taking with this, because he's somebody that would do, retail variants for comic book cons. As I already showed you guys his work, he does exclusives for Dynamite Entertainment, Red Sonja ones and things like that. So it's very interesting that he is sort of taking a stance and seeing this as a problem, that this is going to be copyright infringement, that you guys are overstepping here, that I don't want to be working with companies that are, doing non-official Marvel licensed stuff or Disney licensed stuff or DC licensed stuff. And also, a whole other conversation, there have been some Fame books that have used AI as well. So they're skirting the lines in any sort of way that they can skirt the line with a lot of the comic books that they're making. I've been saying this since they started. I have never and will never give my money to these cheap money grabs of covers, books. It's sad. Thank you for speaking out on this. I agree with you 100%. I have long been disturbed by the blatant copyright violations this company facilitates. Thank you, Nathan, for your comment and stance. This person says, what is a Fame book? The only thing I can think of is the Fame Miley Cyrus comic I bought for my daughter. A perfect example of somebody who said, hey, Miley Cyrus, my daughter likes that comic book. Let me buy it from her. And he has no idea, probably has no idea, that that comic book is not necessarily something that is actually associated to Miley Cyrus. And this is a common thing that people don't know about. This person here says, what is a Fame book? This person, what books are these? What are Fame books? Fame question mark? As you guys can see, there's a lot of people out there that don't know what is going on with these Fame books. And even though on my channel, I've had conversations about this at different times, I thought it would be important to kind of make a video where I really, really put it all into perspective, why people are doing these things and what the issue is and why ultimately they might end up being problematic. But, it doesn't really matter because a lot of people are still buying them, still selling them on the secondary market. Now, very, very interesting. Let's talk about the retailer factor and let's see if Nathan has a point where he should not be working with retailers or, it's on the retailers to stop doing this. Let me kind of put it into perspective as to why this has become so popular as a model for why comic book retailers are doing these Fame books. Now, if you guys happen to know, we've had many discussions about this on the channel before, about the retailer variant exclusive. If you want to make a comic book with Marvel, well, you sign up to Marvel's retail program, you make an order with them, they kind of present you, here's the variant covers that are coming out. Do you guys want to have a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive? Pick one that you want. And when you pick that one, you have to buy 3,000 copies of it at minimum. It often ends up being a little bit more, maybe up to 4,000 copies. And that's only if you just want a regular cover. Maybe you want the virgin of it. Well, if you want the virgin, you got to buy more of them. And so it becomes this very, very high risk, high reward thing where you have to buy, 3,000 comic books at, $2 a piece. You're spending $6,000 just to do it. Can you even sell 50 of them? And with the pullback of buying within the comic book space, it's become harder for online retailers to be able to be successful in 2025 versus when all this stuff was popping off in 2021 and 2022. So what did they decide to do? Well, along comes a company called Tidalwave where they decide to do these fame books, and they do the Charlie Cox biography, which is really like a Daredevil Spider-Man cover, for instance. And you can do that as an online retailer, and you only have to order as many copies as you want from Tidalwave because they'll print whatever you want. Unlike Marvel and DC, which requires you to do 3,000, they'll make 20 copies for you if that's all you want. So you make 20 copies, and then you can call them limited to 20, and you can sell them for $25, $45, $75, whatever your price is. You can actually do the things where you make, a few cover A's, and then you do a couple spot foil ones, and then you do a one of one, super scarce gold hollow foil Charlie Cox biography variant, whatever the case is, and you charge that for $150, and if someone is willing to buy it, someone's willing to buy it. And so you can have this very, very low risk version of doing a retailer exclusive, and you can have a presentation at a comic book con, and you can make your money that way, and it's a lot less risk. And that's why a lot of retailers are going to this model. But the ultimate question here is this actually legal? Why haven't Marvel and DC done anything about it? Well, if I had to guess, I would just assume that Marvel and DC don't really know that it's going on, or it's too small for them to care about it. But again, I'm also not a lawyer, so I don't know if this is actually within the area for it to be legal, and it's okay that they're doing this stuff because it's at a small enough level where it doesn't actually matter. I happened to ask ChatGPT if this was legal, and ChatGPT told me that it was maybe legal and certainly risky, and if Marvel and DC ever decided to crack down on this, they would very, very, very likely win the case to shut it down. So that's what ChatGPT told me. But if you're somebody out there who has a law degree and you work with copyright infringement and all this stuff, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. So anyways, that's all I have for this one. That was me doing a recap of the fame Tidalwave craze. Comic artists coming out now saying that they don't want to have anything to do with these books. They don't want to work on them. I think that this is going to be a continued point of friction between a lot of comic book retailers, publishers, and artists themselves. There's a lot of people that are happy to do this stuff because they want the work and they want to make money. And there's a lot of retailers that just want to be able to sell books, and if they can do it, and customers are happy, and somebody just walks in and they say, well, hey, I like Daredevil. That looks like Daredevil to me. And they buy that comic book. Well, who cares? But there's a lot of people that sort of think that way and feel that way. And, they just want to do what's right for them. But on the other hand, we're having artists starting to make stances on this and starting to call out retailers. And I think that if more and more people start to feel that these things are icky and they don't want to participate in this stuff, or they refuse to buy them, then certainly retailers will feel that pressure, and we'll have to see what ends up happening with these comic books in the future. Anyways, that's all for this one. That was me going over this story. What do you guys think about the famed Tidalwave books? How do you guys feel about, them kind of skirting the lines and being able to produce this type of stuff? Do you guys think that it's IP infringement? How do you guys feel about the story overall? Do you guys agree with Nathan? Do you guys think that these comic books are fine? Let me know in the comments. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. See y'all in the next video.